If you've ever been to my website, Techmoan.com, which no doubt you haven't, if you scroll down the front page here, on the right hand side you'll notice a list of recommended action cameras. Now, one of the cameras that made it onto that list when I bought it back in March 2015 and is still there now is the Yi camera. This was one of the first good quality budget 1080p 60 capable action cameras, and it's still a great little camera to this day, and I'd still recommend it. However, one thing that's happened ever since I've reviewed that camera, whatever little camera I've reviewed since, people have said, should I get this or should I get the Yi? Which in many cases has been a bit of an odd question. You see, the Yi's a little bit different. It doesn't have an LCD screen on the back. Most of those other cameras I've reviewed since do. This one's controlled over Wi-Fi with an app. That's how you change the settings. Now, I'm one of those people that prefers to be able to change the settings via on-screen menus on the camera. Now, you can buy a little viewfinder LCD screen for the Yi, but now they've brought out a new model which does indeed have a screen on the back. But I've kind of buried the lead because, of course, this one is a 4K camera as well. Now, I've had this camera a couple of months. It was provided to me free of charge by the manufacturer. All they wanted in return was for me to report back any errors or problems or even suggestions of room for improvement, anything I spotted about the camera. As it was, it seems to work fine. I haven't had any problems with it at all. The only thing I will mention though, because it's pre-production, you might notice some rough edges on the fit and finish which you won't see on the finished version. I think the type of plastic that's on the camera, for example, is a little bit different to the finished one. Now, I'm briefly showing you some specs on screen. If you want to see these, press pause now. It's got things such as the weight and the camera lens specs on there. One spec that's very important though is the memory card you're going to be using. You need to use one that's capable of storing 4K video. So that's a UHS-1, but it's a U3. Notice the 3 in the U here. That's the important thing. That means it's fast enough to store the video. You'll see it there on the memory card itself, the 3 in the U there. So if you're unsure about the memory card that you plan on buying, go to the Yi Technology website. They've got a list there of the ones that they say will work with this camera, but it's always the case with 4K. It's a very demanding format. You need a fast card. Also notice point B there, it goes up to 128 gigabytes as a maximum memory card size. Now, if you really are interested in the specs of the camera, then it's worth going over to that Yi website because you'll learn all about what chips are used in it, apparently all the latest and greatest ones. I've learned that the screen on the back of it has got Gorilla Glass on there, it's 2.19 inches diagonally, and it's got a 640 by 360 resolution. One thing that's very important is the Wi-Fi. It's 802.11a, B, G and N, 2.4 gigahertz, but also 5 gigahertz. That means your video files will copy across to your phone quicker than they would with a lot of other cameras, and the camera is available in black, white and rose gold. Now, the kit that was sent to me is the Selfie Stick Kit. I'd imagine this is perhaps one of the top of the range ones. It's got all the bits here. So we've got the camera, a selfie stick, battery, little USB lead, instructions for both the selfie stick and the camera, and a little remote control as well. Now, the selfie stick, it's one of these expandable things. It'll hold my iPhone 6 Plus in there, so it'll take a big phone, and the remote control is Bluetooth, and it enables you to switch between photo and video mode and start and stop recording. That's it, but it's very handy. It uses a little button cell in the back for power. Now, the camera itself, I say the plastic on here, that isn't the finished version. You can tell it's an early version of the plastic. I did ask them about this. I sent them an email. They said, no, it's not the version you'll get at the end. It's got that important tripod screw hole on the bottom. Now, the battery for this, I believe it is just for this particular model. You won't be able to use a battery from another camera for this one. Again, that was something I asked them about. They said, no, it's just for this particular camera. Now, once the battery's slid in the bottom there, you've also got a little area for your micro SD card. It looks a little bit fiddly, but I've got more used to putting this in since I did this video. But yeah, your micro SD card goes down the side of the battery there, and we've got this little hinge door which just clicks in place. This little cover on the side hides the USB for charging and data transfer. I'd imagine that's going to look a little bit neater on the finished version of the camera. On the back of it, of course, we've got this big touch screen, which is really quite nice. And on the top, we've got a speaker on the left-hand side and stereo microphones at either side of the button in the middle here, which is your power on or off button, and start and stop recording as well. So we powered it on. It comes on pretty quickly. And then to start recording, all we'd have to do would be to tap that button on the top. You'll see the LED on the front there, the one on the top that's flashing now to show it's recording. And you can also, of course, see it on top of the screen there. We've got the indicator to show it's recording. You can see what we're recording. And we've got a bit of information here, how much you can fit on the memory card, battery, that's the setting, that's the video mode, that's the playback mode. And of course, if you want to stop it recording, just tap the top button again. And of course, if you wanted to turn it off, you just hold that down for a couple of seconds, that button on the top. But it's good that it's got a physical button for the start and stop recording, but all the rest is based around this touch screen on the back. So to change video modes, just tap the bottom there. You can see we've got the different kind of modes that we can select. So there's 6 on screen there, nice big icons. And if we scroll up, there's another 3 here as well. To swap between these modes, you notice my finger isn't doing it until I actually just tap on one of them. So you can scroll by dragging and then just tap to select. So now we're in the photo mode. And now we're in the video mode. It's as simple as that. It's a really good little system for getting around the camera very quickly. Now once you're in a mode, if you press the little cog at the right hand side, that enables you to change the settings for that mode. So we're in video, we'll just tap that little cog there. That then lets you change the settings for that video mode, or you can choose the video mode at the top here, and you can see we've got a lot of different resolutions that we can pick from. And you can scroll down this list here, and then in some of them you can also choose the frames per second. For example, in 1080p I can choose 30, 60 or 120 frames per second. In fact, there's so many, let me lay them all out on screen for you here. Now please don't feel it's your duty to try and educate the world on the difference between 4K and UHD resolutions. The manufacturers are calling 3840 by 2160 4K, so that's what I'm using here. If it is really upsetting you, please write to the manufacturers, but also there's a lot better things you could be worrying about. However, if you look at the top there, 4K is available in 25 frames per second or 30 frames per second, depending on whether you've switched the camera into the PAL or NTSC mode in one of the menus. And down the page there, you'll see I've coded the different frame rates for each resolution all the way down. Also at the bottom you'll see the video specs tell you that a 4K file recorded at 30 frames per second runs at 61.55 megabits a second, and for every 1 gig you use on your memory card you're only getting 2 minutes 15 worth of video. 4K video is memory hungry. Now, I don't really want to go through all the menus on the camera because, to be honest, it's frankly very boring. It's got your normal stuff in here, your normal menus that you'd expect in any camera. There's nothing exciting that you've never seen before. There's also nothing missing either. One thing I will talk about is electronic image stabilization. The camera has built-in stabilization, however, it only works in certain video resolutions, which I put on screen here now. Now, of course, you'll notice that there's something missing off that list. Yes, it doesn't go up to the 4K modes. These are the modes where you can't use electronic image stabilization. They're the ones with the higher resolutions. There's also the ones with higher frame rates as well. So yes, unfortunately, you cannot stabilize 4K video with this camera, but that's not unexpected because I haven't seen any other action cameras that will enable you to do that. Now, in the photo menus, you get the usual settings, things such as your metering mode, white balance, exposure value, ISOs, and then the different resolutions you can take stills in are on screen here now. You'll see below there we've got the countdown timer settings. That's for, say, you put the camera on a wall and you give it a 10-second countdown to take a single still image. Then at the bottom we've got the burst modes from 3 photos in a second all the way up to 30 photos in 6 seconds. Quite comprehensive. Now over the page here, these are the other modes that are more interesting to me. We've got time-lapse video, so you can do a 4K time-lapse video and you can have the intervals for those frames starting as low as a frame every half second, going all the way up to 1 frame every 60 seconds. And then we can do time-lapse photos, so that's to record a full 12 megapixels still at the intervals you've set. Slow motion video, which are in 720p, loop over the oldest footage, and at the bottom we can take video as well as taking a still at regular intervals at the same time. Now, if we get into the playback menus, you can scroll back and forth through your pictures. You get a nice big clear screen here. You can watch the video that you've taken on the screen itself. Sound comes out of the speaker at the top there. It's quite nice and loud. You can adjust the volume of that by dragging a slider up the right hand side of the touch screen as well. And also, if you're watching a video and you want to skip forward in it, all you have to do is just drag the slider at the bottom part of the screen to the part of the video that you're interested in watching. And of course you can delete files off the camera itself. Now let's take a look at that waterproof case that's been sent to me. Well, this looks like the finished article to me, very nicely constructed. We've got the standard hinge on the bottom there. That's the same style and shape as the GoPro one, so anything that you've got which attaches to a GoPro case via the hinge mount will also attach to this case here. In this particular instance, I'm putting a tripod screw mount on the bottom because that's what came inside the box. We've got the standard type clip on here with a locking mechanism on there which opens up. We've got the rubber around the back there to keep it watertight, and then when you put it on, it pulls it all tightly together to keep the water out. The front has got a glass lens on there, a flat lens on it. Of course, you cannot operate the touchscreen when it's in the case. All you can do is turn the camera on and turn it off, of course, and start and stop recording using that button on the top. However, if you've got the remote control as well, you can change between the photo and video modes by using that little Bluetooth remote control. So you see the top button there changes between modes, just photo and video, and the bottom one starts and stops recording. Now I'll show you how the case works underwater, so I'll just put this car in my bath here, and we'll just take the camera down and take it underwater. With that flat lens, you can see that there's no distortion, no problems with that at all. It takes a good clear image, so all fine there. I'll show you a couple of other little tricks I've figured out here. You can change between the photo and video mode on the camera itself by swiping like that. That just goes in between photo and video alternately. And in addition, if you pull down from the top, you can get into some other settings here, such as turning the Wi-Fi on and off or locking the screen on the camera. Now, talking of Wi-Fi, I best mention the app itself. So it's available for iOS or Android. You can download it from the QR code in the manual, which will send you through to the appropriate app store. It's the same app that works with the original Yi camera. Now you get this screen here telling you to log in. Just ignore that if you want. You can click skip at the top left, and then you'll put the password in which your camera tells you. You can change that password as well. You don't have to stick with the default one. And of course, once you've got it connected up, you get the usual live video feed here. You can start and stop recording by using the phone app. You can also change all those settings that are in the camera which we saw earlier on. You can view the files that you've got stored on the memory card in the camera in a very nice, smooth, fluid app, and you can also stream those from the camera. And once you've got the clip you want, you can also download it to your phone itself in a choice of resolutions. And because the files are being copied across in 802.11n at 5 GHz, it copies about as fast as you could reasonably expect it to. Okay, sample clip time. So I'm going to have these available, or some of them that you can download as well, but here I'm going to show you some clips that I've shot during the 2 months or so that I've had this camera. I've shot in a lot of different locations and situations, so hopefully you'll find some of these useful or even interesting. But remember, of course, if you do choose to download any of these, the file sizes are generally going to be pretty horrendous. However, it's worth perhaps downloading maybe 1 or 2 clips if you do plan on getting this camera, because one thing that's important to know is whether or not your computer is up to the task of editing 4K video. Now, I edit my movies in iMovie, which is just a consumer level package. However, to edit in 4K, I had to get a MacBook Pro, which again is pretty normal stuff, but I had to spec it way up to the top. Fast processor, fair enough, but also a lot of available RAM and a massive SSD. Those are the things that you need to be able to edit 4K video. You're dealing with very large files that you have to shift around very quickly. So the most important thing you'll need on your computer, whatever you're going to use, I suggest is a good, large, fast SSD. Now, I've been shooting in 4K for over a year, so there's a couple of things I've noticed work better than others. For example, this image here works well because the camera is being held still, because I've rested it on a bin, and it gets a good sharp image and it draws the eye into the background. You start looking at those buildings and looking at the detail, which is something you can only do when the image is perfectly still like this. You'll notice demos in shops when they're showing 4K, they tend to be very static. It's things like fields and plants and buildings and stuff like that. They don't tend to show you things like this because it doesn't really bring out the best in 4K. It just looks like a normal video, really. Admittedly, it's nice and sharp, and I'll plan on using 4K in the future whatever I'm shooting because it looks better, but you get the real best results when the image is perfectly still, which of course we're dealing with an action camera here, and those don't tend to be held completely still on a tripod, although this one does have a tripod mount. So even this image here, where you can see we've got a lot of detail, look at the buses at the bottom there, because my hand's shaking a little bit, it takes all the sort of detail or the interest out of the picture, and you notice it more because your eye's focusing on a smaller area like a little pinprick. As soon as I move the camera just a millimetre, you think, oh, that's shaking a lot, when really if it was a 1080p image you probably wouldn't notice the shake as much. Now another thing that goes for this camera as well as all the other action cameras, of course, they use wide angle lenses. Now that's useful in some situations for getting a lot of stuff on screen, but it also means everything looks a long way away. For example, this scene here, to my eye, I could see all these buildings, it all looked great, but when I look back at this video, everything just looks so far away. Now of course with 4K you are able to crop in on an image so you can get things looking a little bit nearer in editing, but of course you lose some of the resolution, not as much as if you'd try to crop in this much on a 1080p image, but it's something to bear in mind. Action cameras make everything look a long way away. Okay, I'll stop stating the obvious. Let's have a look at some other footage here. So this is time-lapse shot at 1 frame every second. It looks a little bit blurry because it's shot through glass, as you can see there. It's not on the top, but that's because I didn't have a way of mounting it. Now here, I put the camera on a statue, I think it was, and shot 1 frame every half second, and that's what you're looking at now. Again, that's in 4K. I really like the time-lapse modes in this camera. I think they're very effective. For this shot, I put it down on a plant pod, I think it was. It was wobbling around a little bit. You can see every time a vehicle goes past, it blows in the wind a little bit, which kind of ruins the effect, but you get the idea. Now this is one of the slow motion modes. I think it's the slowest of the slow, and it's shot in a 720p resolution. You can tell that it looks pretty soft, although I think some of that might be to do with pointing the camera a little bit towards the sun, because this shot looks quite a bit sharper than that one, and it's in the same resolution. Right, so I mentioned earlier on that the camera has stereo microphones, so let's have a listen to something that the camera's recorded.
Let go your heart, let go your head, and let go your heart, let go your head, and
Right, I'll show you some photos that I took with this camera. Now, I don't tend to take photos with action cameras normally, but I'm quite happy with the results from this one. These were all done in the highest 12 megapixel mode, and whilst I wouldn't tend to take all my holiday snaps with one of these, I find that you can get some quite interesting shots with a wide angle lens that you can't get with your normal point and shoot camera. Now, I've been very busy with this camera. I've even managed to get out on my motorcycle with it. Now, for these shots here, I've mounted the camera in my top pocket, which means that I don't get the vibrations that I get if I mount it on the bike itself. You can see I've got the case on the right handlebar there, and I'll be putting the camera into that in a moment. You'll be able to see the difference. Now, all you get in this position is wind noise. You can't hear anything other than wind noise. However, if I put the camera in its case, well, I can still hear pretty much just wind noise, and I'm getting a lot of shake and vibration, because that's what always happens if you put a camera on the handlebars of a bike. You can only really hear the engine properly when you drop the speed right down to, say, below 15 miles per hour. As you can hear, even with the camera in its waterproof case, the sound is still peaking out, so it's obviously a very sensitive microphone, possibly too sensitive. Okay, let's calm things down for a moment. You might have noticed in the resolutions that there's a 4K and then there's a 4K Ultra. Let's look at the difference between those. So this is the 4K and this is the 4K Ultra. Very subtle difference. Let's go back again. That's 4K and that's 4K Ultra. All that's happening is we're squashing the size of the image in a little bit, giving us more horizontal view. But it's such a subtle effect that I don't think it's really worth switching on. I'd just stick to the normal 4K. Now, two very useful features of this camera are electronic image stabilization and lens distortion correction. So let's have a look at both of those and how they affect the image. Now, you can only use these at a maximum resolution of 2.5K. As I mentioned earlier on, they don't work in 4K, unfortunately. But let's have a look at them anyway. So first off, look how the image seems to bend in, like you're looking through a fishbowl. And now let's switch the lens distortion correction on. And notice how everything is now straightened out. That's a much more pleasing image. We'll switch it back off so you can see the difference again, and then switch it back on again. Now, on this next shot, we're going to turn on the electronic image stabilization as well. And notice how much of the image we're losing with these shots. We're moving in a little bit on each one. Now, it's still a very wide angle lens, but we have cut down quite a little bit of the image. So let's switch everything off to show you what it looks like at the beginning. It's a shame that you can't use that lens distortion in the 4K modes because it really is quite effective. Anyway, let's have a look at some nighttime footage. Right, there's a couple of things to mention here. As I was putting my video together, editing all the clips together, I realised I hadn't got any low light footage. I'd shot all the video on nice sunny days, so I've quickly put the camera in the car here and I'm just taking it out to show you how the camera copes in low light. Now you'll also notice that on the screen there's a time and date stamp. Now that's something that can be switched on or off. At the moment I've got time and date showing, but you can also just have either the time or the date, or as I mentioned of course nothing at all. In addition to that, I should mention that you could of course use this as a commuter cam. Now I'm not saying dash cam, and the difference that I'm defining on this is a commuter cam is something that somebody riding a bicycle or a motorcycle, they can put this camera on their helmet and record their journey to and from work, and you can have the camera set to loop over the oldest footage, so all week you could just be recording in 4K your journeys to work and only keep any clips if something interesting happened. But it doesn't work completely as a dash cam would, because on a dash cam those cameras automatically start recording when they receive power. That's not something this camera does. You have to manually start the camera recording and you have to manually stop the camera recording at the end of your journey. So it's not strictly speaking a 4K dash camera. However, you could use it to record your journeys as long as you're happy to start and stop the video recording. Right, since they sent it me, it's only fair that I show you this selfie stick. It's well constructed. I'm just not really a selfie stick kind of person. So here's my iPhone 6 Plus. As you can see, it fits into there quite easily. And of course, that's then your viewfinder for the camera that you put on the tripod bit on the top here. And there you go, that's me with a selfie stick. Not something you see every day. But of course, it's not just a selfie stick. You can extend this part out here and you could use it to shoot over the top of crowds. So it could actually be quite a useful little thing if you ever come across a situation where you need to do that. You might have noticed earlier on in the video that there's just one port on the camera, a micro USB port. That will lead some people to think perhaps you can plug a microphone into this with some kind of adapter. I've checked this out with the manufacturers. The answer is no, you can't plug anything into it. However, they say they are working on a Bluetooth microphone. I've also put some standard possible FAQs and answers to those on screen there, things that I tend to get asked quite a bit, and I will point out that if I do get asked a question quite a few times, you'll find the answer in the video description text box. It's the only part of the video that I can alter after the video has gone out, so look in the video description text box, you might find the answer in there. The Xiaoyi 4K action camera employs all the latest and greatest technological innovations available to an action camera today. And they put that up on their website against the GoPro Hero 4 Black, which is a little bit long in the tooth at this point. And of course, on that table there, the Xiaoyi trounces the Hero. Now, I don't have a Hero 4, however, I do have a Sony 4K action camera that I bought about a year or so ago and never got around to doing a review on, so let me talk about it briefly here today. One of the disappointments with the Sony was that it couldn't stabilise 4K video, which is exactly the same issue I've got with the Xiaoyi. I feel that 4K video needs stabilisation more than lower resolution, so it's a shame that neither camera have it. But after that, the Sony was a bit of a disaster as far as the menus go. There's just too much in there to fit on that little silly screen with those abbreviated things. It's so annoying. Whereas the Xiaoyi, so easy just to select the mode that you want. Just tap on the screen, choose the mode, everything's laid out in nice, clear, easy to understand English with good simple menus. But there's one area in which the Xiaoyi totally trounces the Sony, and for that matter the GoPro, and its battery life. I was able to record on one charge for an hour and 55 minutes in 4K mode on the Xiaoyi, whereas the best I could get on the Sony was 55 minutes. That just shows you the difference that a year's technological improvement makes. The Xiaoyi is using the latest low power, energy efficient 4K chips, whereas the Sony and GoPro are stuck in the past. If I had to find any niggles at all with the Xiaoyi, I'd say with the microphones on the top here, it's very easy to cover the right hand mic with your finger without realising you're doing it, so you'd have to perhaps hold it a little bit differently. And also sometimes you can find yourself activating the on-screen menus with your fingers when you don't want to, because of course again you touch the screen on the back. So it's all about holding it in a different way. Also you can lock the screen to avoid activating any of those menus, and you can unlock it like you would a mobile phone. And perhaps it's not such a big deal, because once the camera is recording, all of those on-screen menus are deactivated. You can't accidentally go into the menus when it's recording. It's only when the camera is in standby. The website for this camera makes the bold claim that this is the best action camera ever, period. Notice we're not saying the best budget action camera, no. The budgetary concerns of the original Yi camera have been left far behind. Here they're trying to create the best action camera. That means using the best components, and of course those things don't come cheap. But I think the results that they've produced have been worthwhile. This camera probably costs about the same as a Sony or a GoPro, but I think it's an awful lot more capable than both. And if you fancy getting hold of one of these, there's links to purchase one in the video description. And that's where you'll also find the links to the downloadable sample clips. But that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.
I think this whole 4K thing is just a load of nonsense. It looks exactly the same as standard definition on my television. I'm going to wait for 8K. I've heard the Japanese have it already.
Well, it says in here that to benefit from 8K, you need to buy at least an 85-inch screen.
Right.
Okay, so at the moment you can't afford a 65-inch 4K television.
Okay.
Could you afford an 85-inch 8K television?
No.
Would an 85-inch television fit in our house?
No.
And given the fact that people with 4K televisions are resorting to watching the Smurfs too, do you think that there'd be enough 8K content to watch on your too large, too expensive 8K television?
No.
Well then, it appears that yet again you're just spouting nonsense that nobody else cares about.
Well, I'll have you know that I'm a minor Z-list YouTube celebrity.
Exactly!
People out there value my feedback.
Well then, that reminds me, the neighbour's dog has left you some feedback on the front lawn, and you need to go and clean it up. And don't even think about leaving a response.